Last night, I treated my wife like a queen. We've been going through a rough patch lately, and this seemed like the perfect time to set things right. I took the day off from work, ostensibly to take our two kids, Jack 14 and Shane 12, to a week-long soccer camp, but mainly to make sure everything was perfect. I started by sending 24 long-stem red roses to Melinda at her work. I wrote the note myself. Asterisk roses are red. My love for you is true. My plans for tonight will make it clearer to you. Dinner's on me. Dessert is just you. Seconds and thirds are guaranteed too. Asterisk. I know, not exactly Shakespeare, but I figured it would do the trick. It did. I received a very warm welcome at the front door and a report on how envious her coworkers were. Melinda greeted me with a special look and a promise of a wonderful night. I took the lead in setting up a romantic evening, focusing on making it all about her. Next, I prepared a relaxing bubble bath for her, complete with a glass of chilled Chardonnay. I encouraged her to take her time while I went to pick up dinner from her favorite Italian restaurant. After setting the table, I was pleasantly surprised when Melinda appeared in a stunning outfit I had bought for her, adding a touch of excitement to the evening. After dinner and some wine, I led her to our bedroom where we spent a special, intimate time together, reuniting and enjoying each other's company. We expressed our love and affection deeply, enjoying the closeness and connection. The next morning I got up early, showered, and left a note letting her know I'd be working late to make up for taking the day off. I had a busy day ahead, and as I checked my watch, I awaited the arrival of my next appointment, a 3:04. I checked my watch. Any minute now, the 304 would bring my wife of 16 years, Melinda. She had been the center of my thoughts, especially given the recent changes in our relationship. Melinda had been distant for the better part of a year, and my suspicions had intensified over the last month. It was the small things, subtle changes in behavior and habits, that started raising red flags. For example, while our intimate moments had dwindled, Melinda seemed to be putting more effort into her appearance, dressing more provocatively. I noticed these shifts and began to piece them together. One evening, after a night out without the kids, Melinda arrived at the restaurant with an unmistakable glow, one that suggested she had experienced something fulfilling earlier. When she declined intimacy later that night, citing a minor health issue, I decided to investigate further. I started paying close attention to her whereabouts, her time away from home, and even the little things she said. It's surprising how much you can uncover by carefully listening and observing. I've always believed that people often try to avoid direct lies, opting instead for evasions and half-truths. This means you have to read between the lines and interpret the underlying messages in their words. As I continued to gather information, I couldn't ignore the growing sense of disrespect that seemed to permeate our interactions. There was an undeniable condescension I felt. It seemed I'd lost my former position in the hierarchy and equality of our relationship. It was also challenging to get a hold of her at work on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. Despite my suspicions turning into certainty, there didn't seem to be any reason to consult a lawyer. Then I found what I needed, actual physical evidence, a pair of black sheer panties. I remembered the last time I'd seen her wearing them, which coincided with the last time we had been intimate. The discrepancies between these dates led me to believe she had been unfaithful. Confronting Melinda was tricky, given her history of lying. I assumed she must have justified her actions with some form of rationalization. I decided on a straightforward approach and suggested a special night out for just the two of us, reminding her that she owed me. I specifically asked her to wear the black sheer panties that night. As we prepared for our evening, I reminded her about the panties, and she assured me I wouldn't be disappointed. Dinner went well, with me giving her plenty of attention and wine. By the time we got home, Melinda was more enthusiastic than I'd seen her in years. "Strip for me," I said, lying back against the headboard with my hands behind my head. "Come on, show me what you've got." Melinda began to sway drunkenly but shook her head. "Melinda, you owe me. We haven't been intimate in almost a month." I waggled my finger at her. "We had intimate the day you went on that trip." "It's only been 2.5 weeks," she interjected. "Fine, 2.5 weeks. One fact agreed upon," I said. "Come on, take it off." She hesitated. "Okay, but don't expect this every time you take me out." I nodded as Melinda slowly began to disrobe. She unzipped her skirt and hooked her thumbs in the waistband. "Hey, who's doing the strip-tease here?" she joked, though I could hear the edge in her voice. "I thought this was about pleasing me," I said. "I want to see those panties. Remember, they were a gift. They symbolize our marriage. Come on, humor me." "I couldn't find them," Melinda said, her frustration rising. "All right, where are the panties?" I asked. "You always wash your lingerie together. You have the bra, where are the panties?" She was getting more upset, but I remained calm. "Don't get mad at me. I'm just asking you to wear something I gave you. If you had told me the truth earlier, I wouldn't have insisted. So, the last time you wore them was right before my trip. I remember because you looked so sexy in them when we were getting ready for bed. Maybe they got kicked under the bed," I suggested. "Tim, can we just forget about the panties?" Melinda's desire was fading and I could see doubt in her eyes. "Can't you just make love to me?" she asked, trying to change the subject. "Sure, no problem," I said, though I wasn't finished. "I remember where I bought those. They really meant a lot to me." Her voice was weary. "Yes, Tim. I last saw you with them on right here in this room," I said, rolling off the bed and kneeling beside it. "You took them off before we had intimate, right?" "I remember," she said. "I took them off and we had intimate. But now I'm standing here, I'm not wearing them, and I have a headache. I think I'll give you a rain check on the rest of the evening." Melinda began picking up her clothes. "What's the problem?" "They're just panties." She looked miserable. "Are we okay? Is there something you want to tell me? It's been 2.5 weeks since we've had intimate, and I make a simple request and now I'm in trouble. Why didn't you just tell me you didn't know where the panties were? What's so hard about being honest?" "I didn't want to disappoint you," she said. "I know it's been a while since we've been together. We're both so busy. I guess I turned a small thing into a big deal. I'm sorry." "I'm sorry too," I said. "How about we reschedule?" I smiled as I pulled out the crusted underwear and extended them to her. She took them, looking puzzled, then momentarily horrified, but soon regained her composure. "So that's where they've been. I thought I looked there." "Go ahead, put them on," I said. "They're filthy, Tim," she protested. "I'll make sure you're the first to see them after I wash them," she replied confidently. I had to admire her brazenness. Despite the fact that we hadn't been intimate in 2.5 weeks, Melinda insisted the last time she wore those panties was before we had intimate. I questioned why they appeared so worn, trying to keep my tone neutral and non-accusatory. Melinda's response was a performance of lies and evasions. She confused the dates and timings of our intimacy, and even made a big deal out of my suspicions, implying that my jealousy was misplaced. She thought it was cute that I suspected her of being unfaithful, and I apologized for my jealousy and poor memory. Her reaction made me feel she thought everything was fine, but it wasn't. My apologies dissolved into a white-hot anger, and I shifted from uncertainty to the conviction that she was seeing someone else. Realizing the extent of her disrespect, I knew our marriage was over. I needed incontrovertible evidence, ideally catching her in the act. With modern GPS technology, phone taps, computer snooping, and digital voice recorders, I quickly gathered a clear picture of her activities. Her lover, Ernie, was someone she met 2 to 3 times a week, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and frequently Saturdays, usually at a hotel on the other side of town. The routine became apparent through the recordings, with the biggest surprise being Melinda's lack of guilt. In conversations, I was merely an inconvenience to their relationship. This realization fueled my resolve for retribution. I was no longer contemplating reconciliation. She was the enemy. The tipping point came when I heard a recorded conversation between Melinda and Ernie shortly after the incident with the panties. During their call, Melinda expressed how much Ernie's attempts to be nice to her were cute. She explained that the stained underwear I found were his and not mine, and she laughed about how she loved me as her husband while also appreciating Ernie in a different way. The more I listened, the clearer it became that she was unapologetically enjoying her double life. Melinda was going to pay for her betrayal, both in the short term and the long term. I planned to make her suffering as memorable as possible, but I wasn't interested in targeting Ernie directly. If trouble came his way, so be it. My primary concern was to protect our children from the immediate fallout of our family breaking apart, while ensuring Melinda faced the full weight of her actions. I arranged for the kids to attend a week-long soccer camp at a university a couple of hours away, running Monday through Friday. I dropped them off on Monday morning and spoke with the camp directors, explaining that I was dealing with serious issues involving their mother, including concerns about faithfulness and potential drug use. I wanted to shield the kids from the initial pain of the divorce and to ensure that Melinda bore the full brunt of the consequences. Tuesday was the day of reckoning. Melinda was scheduled to meet Ernie at 4. I spent that day preparing everything, finalizing the divorce papers, changing the locks, and handling bank accounts and credit cards. This was a day Melinda would never forget. I checked my watch again. Timing was crucial. I smiled when I saw her car enter the parking lot. Operation was now in motion. I called Melinda's work as soon as I saw her car, leaving a quick message on her voicemail about an emergency and to call me on my cell phone as soon as possible. Ernie arrived a few minutes later. He looked young, probably in his mid to late 20s. Any remaining doubts about my plan disappeared when I saw Melinda greet Ernie with a kiss. I called her cell phone while they were still together. She glanced at her phone and, as expected, let it ring. I hung up at the start of her voicemail and called again. I figured she would either turn her phone off or lock it in her car, giving her plausible deniability if questioned later. She chose to lock it in her car. I left a message saying there was a family emergency and that she needed to call me as soon as possible. I watched them go into the room and began to call and hang up every few minutes, planning to leave multiple missed call notifications on her phone. I waited about 20 minutes, assuming they were at least undressed if not more involved. I drove to a spot next to Melinda's car, opened my trunk to appear natural if anyone was watching, and proceeded to deflate both tires on the driver's side by unscrewing the inner part of the valve stems. I then inserted a few roofing nails into the tire tread to make it look like she had run over a bunch of nails. Ernie's truck received some attention too. Although I had no intention of causing physical harm, I decided to make things difficult for him as well. I borrowed a small floor jack, lifted the front of his truck, and loosened the oil pan bolt, making sure it was barely attached. After lowering the truck, I returned the jack to my trunk and closed it. I was finished within 15 minutes and drove off to wait. They emerged from the room 2 hours later with more kissing and hugging. The only noticeable difference was that Melinda's movements were more relaxed and affectionate, which she tends to be after being intimate. Her demeanor changed abruptly when she saw the flat tires. She started gesturing and waving her arms as she inspected the car. Ernie must have said something foolish because Melinda turned and said something that made him back away, hands up. I called her phone again. She looked in the car and fished around in her purse for her keys, clearly flinching when she saw the number of missed calls. It was time for my performance. I saw her dial and braced myself. "Hello, Tim." Her voice sounded shaky and nervous. "My God, Melinda, where have you been?" I yelled into the phone, taking a breath. "You don't have to yell, Tim. I can hear you just fine. I've been trying for hours to reach you. Where are you? Why aren't you at work?" My voice was edged with panic as I continued, and she began to stammer out a feeble excuse. I started talking over her, crinkling some paper and disrupting my speech pattern to emphasize my frustration. "Be quiet and listen. There's been a serious incident at the soccer camp. Both kids have been taken to the hospital for emergency surgery. The doctor isn't sure if they'll make it. Hurry. My battery's dying. Did you get that? The medical center. I'll meet you there. Hurry, Melinda." I hung up and turned off my phone. I saw Melinda shouting into her phone, then she sprang into action. Melinda pushed Ernie towards his car and soon they were heading for the freeway. I waited until they were out of sight, then drove to Melinda's car. I removed the fake nails from her tires and refilled them with flat fix. She would need her car by the end of the day. I had 2 more calls to make before heading home. I drove towards the freeway they would be taking to get to the university. I stopped at the first emergency call box and pulled out 2 of my voice recorders. I soon reached the State Highway Patrol. I pitched my voice low and added a southern drawl. "Hi, officer. I want to report a case of road rage. I guess you'd call it. I was going the speed limit I emphasized, and this blue Toyota pickup came speeding up behind me right on my tail. Excuse my language, but it was aggressive. I should have pulled over, but anyway, this guy starts leaning on his horn then swerves around me. I was surprised he didn't hit anyone. Then he cut right in front of me. I got a partial plate, just the last 3 numbers, 392. My voice was interrupted by an angry female voice from the recorder. Tell them about the gun, Harold. I saw a gun. I added quickly. That crazy guy flashed a gun at me. I turned away from the phone. Honey, I didn't see it. Look, I'm just telling them my name. The female voice blared out. Those crazy people can track us down and kill us. Hang up, Harold. Hang up right now. I disconnected the call. I had recorded those phrases with a woman at work who had a strong southern drawl. I told her it was for a prank on my shiftless brother-in-law. She'd given me a few takes without batting an eye. I got back in my car and headed home. On the way, I called the soccer camp and in a weary voice, informed them that telling my wife I was divorcing her had not gone well. I said she had gone ballistic and threatened my life. I warned them that she and her companion might be on their way to try and take the children. I asked them not to release the children to her as her companion was a known drug user and it wasn't safe for the kids. The camp operators were very understanding and agreed not to mention anything to the kids unless absolutely necessary. An hour or so later, I was at home eating pizza and drinking beer. I figured I had at least one more hour before Melinda might show up if she was able to contact the soccer camp and determine that the kids were fine. I didn't think that was likely as I had made all the arrangements, and she didn't even have the correct name for the camp, let alone the phone number. If she got to the university, she would discover there was no university medical center or hospital. I had to smile at the thought. If the oil drain plug had fallen out, she and Ernie would be sitting by the side of the road. A couple of hours later, the camp called to report that Melinda and a male companion had indeed shown up. They arrived in the company of the state police, who had pulled them over for speeding and conducted a thorough search for weapons, prompted by the road rage report. The camp officials assured Melinda that the kids were fine, but they refused to let her see them unless I was present. When she questioned what that meant, one of the camp staff mentioned the divorce and asked if the man she was with was her husband or a lover. Melinda turned pale and became hysterical. The state police had to escort her and Ernie off the campus grounds. The soccer camp staff's actions couldn't have been better timed. While Melinda and Ernie were discussing the situation, one of the staff mentioned the drug user reference, which led the police to pull Ernie over again after they left the campus. He ended up getting into an altercation with one of the officers and was arrested for driving while impaired. Melinda, deemed unfit to drive due to her emotional state, was also taken into temporary custody. I received a call from the state police shortly after speaking with the camp officials. I had a detailed conversation with Sergeant Watson, explaining that Melinda had been cheating on me and that I had finally decided to file for divorce. I gave him my lawyer's contact information. The sergeant said he wanted to talk to Melinda and asked if I would be available. I agreed but warned him that she might deny everything. I even suggested that if they wanted to conduct a vaginal swab, it was fine with me, though he declined. Half an hour later, the sergeant called back to say they were releasing Melinda and that she wanted to speak with me. I told him she could call my lawyer at the number I had provided. He chuckled when I mentioned that her car was parked at the motel where she had been with Ernie. A few minutes later, I saw Melinda's cell number on the caller ID. I answered but said nothing. After a long pause, I heard Melinda's trembling voice. Tim, I don't know what you think is going on, but please don't make this any worse than it already is. Your actions have destroyed our family. I hung up and turned off the ringer. I would have loved to see her reaction to the new answering machine message. Hi, this is Tim. Melinda no longer lives here. Her cell number is... At 2 a.m., I heard someone pounding on the front door. I walked to the door and shouted through it, "Your things are in the driveway." I had packed her clothes into trash bags. "Take your things and go away. Tim, please let me in." Melinda sounded exhausted. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding. We need to talk. I love you." We went back and forth but I didn't budge. Finally, I played a part of a phone conversation I had recorded while she was driving where she spoke about her feelings for Ernie. I turned the volume up loud during the discussion about their intimate moments. Melinda started to cry. I told her to get her things and go stay with Ernie or whoever else she was involved with. She left, saying she would go to her parents' place and return the next day to sort things out. The next day didn't go as she had hoped, and neither did the days that followed. I was relentless. I had her officially served at work on Thursday. She was waiting by my car at the end of the workday, furious. "I have nothing to say to you, Tim," she said, anger evident. I remained calm. "Don't you dare talk to me that way. I can't believe you had me served at work. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Her anger was intense. "What I've done? I'll talk to you however I choose. Would you prefer that I ignore you? If I gave you $20, would you leave? How dare you? I am your wife, Tim. I am the mother of our children. When they come home tomorrow they'll find me, not just your accusations. I imagine you'll be somewhere with that other man. Please stop calling me names. It's not going to help us. We need to talk about this. I realize you're angry and upset, but we can work through this. Our marriage can be stronger for this. Would you listen to yourself? Stop calling me names." "Okay, answer me this," I said, glaring at her with an intensity that surprised even me. She seemed to wither under my gaze. "You chose to be with another man. You were intimate with him, risking everything, our marriage, our family, my love and respect for you and my health. By the way, I've been tested and I'm clean so far, but HIV testing requires a 6-month wait." She flinched at that comment. "You risked everything while he risked nothing. What did you get in return? You're about to lose everything, Melinda. What did you get from your lover? What did you gain by throwing all of this away?" She just shook her head, unable to speak. "Exactly right. You got nothing. No jewelry, no romantic getaways, no cars, nothing. No secret bank account, no suitcase full of money. You got nothing. Well, you're right about one thing. I have absolutely no right to call you a fool. A fool would at least get something for their actions. You were with another man and received nothing in return, and now you're going to lose everything." I drove away with her sitting on the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. I arrived at the lawyer's office right on time. I had even stopped by the house to shower and dress in a suit. I wanted her to see me at my best. Sitting opposite her in the lawyer's office, if I cared for her in any way, the look that Melinda gave me should have broken my heart. Her pain was palpable, but my expression remained calm and impassive. My resolve was unwavering. She made one last effort to delay the inevitable. I simply glanced down at my watch and then back up at her. Her shoulders slumped as she picked up the pen and asked my lawyer where to sign. Victory was mine. The first document she signed was the petition for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. At one time I had cared deeply about listing adultery as the cause. I was fortunate to have a lawyer who knew how to bring on the pain. The key, she had told me repeatedly, was in the terms and conditions of the divorce. Success depended on knowing what the other side wanted and what you could force them to give up in return. The entire signing process was a performance my lawyer and I had choreographed. It was quite impressive. The next document was a name change request. Melinda was required to revert to her maiden name. If you don't think that's a big deal, think again. She was no longer going to have the same last name as her children. That point alone nearly derailed the agreement. Watching her relinquish my surname, tears trickling down her cheeks, I felt a twinge of sympathy. It wasn't just the failure of hope that struck me. It was the realization of loss being overwhelmed by the actual reality of surrender. Her losses were suddenly real, no longer just negotiating points. She looked at the tray and shuddered as she removed her wedding ring. As soon as she placed her engagement ring on the tray, it was quickly removed from the room. She twisted her wedding band on her finger, a small token I had allowed her to keep. But even that small victory was about to turn to ashes. "Do you know why I'm letting you keep that ring, Melinda?" I said. "I gave you that ring when I asked you to be my wife. I want you to keep it to remember all that we promised and all that you've thrown away." I pulled my wedding band off my finger and pushed it toward her. "You can have this back. It's still whole and complete. I kept my promises. One of my lawyer's assistants returned with the tray, and Melinda's ring had been cut in two. I picked up the pieces and held them in my open hand before tossing them into a trash can. They were worthless to me now. Melinda seemed to waver in her chair and reached out to grip the table, her head bobbing slightly. My initial thrill of victory began to fade, and I started to feel some sympathy for her. As the next document was placed before her, a quitclaim deed for her share of the house, the key point was that the monetary value of her share was being placed in a college trust for the children, with her as trustee until they came of age. Finally, we came to the document that had leveraged her acceptance of everything that had preceded it, the custody agreement. My lawyer spoke clearly. Do you fully understand the conditions of this custody agreement? The children will remain in the house, and parents will alternate living in the house on a weekly basis. The transition of custody will occur every Sunday between 6 o'clock and 7 p.m. All expenses will be shared equally until the children finish college or reach the age of maturity. If you agree to these conditions and arrangements, please sign at the bottom. I watched as my soon-to-be ex-wife signed. The pen fell listlessly from her hand, and she began to cry in earnest. Defeat is not a pretty sight, and it lasts a long time. I had been one step ahead of Melinda from the moment she left that motel room with Ernie. My position remained unchanged, divorce and control in custody of the kids. I guess she thought she could find a way around it all. I had a couple of things going for me. The children were the key. I had gone out of my way to protect them and ensure that Melinda and her parents had access to them. I also promised not to tell the kids the reasons for our divorce, framing it as your mom and dad are parting ways as partners but not as parents. Another key factor was the threat of revealing video evidence of Melinda with Ernie. Although, truth be told, I didn't actually have any such evidence. Years ago, a friend had mentioned seeing a film with an actress who looked strikingly like Melinda. I checked it out and saw the resemblance. During the planning of my response, I used this resemblance to my advantage by acquiring several such films. I found a couple of videos with actors that matched Ernie's description, mid or late 20s, average height and weight, dark hair, etc. By taping portions of these videos, I produced a fake motel room session. It looked like it had been filmed under poor lighting conditions and was particularly convincing on a small screen. Melinda would have recognized it as a fake immediately, but not her father. During a meeting where he tried to convince me to give Melinda another chance, I showed him the video.